Comeback 2004 Boston Red Sox. It's a documentary mini-series out now on Netflix. It came out a few weeks ago. This is a late review. I have had this thing in my head for weeks, and where I said a few years ago when I reviewed Fever Pitch before the 2021 baseball season started that I wanted to review a baseball movie before every baseball season started, that just hasn't been the case. I totally forgot in 2022, 2023, and this year. And now that the World Series is over and has been over for about a couple weeks, I figured, off season starts. Let's talk some baseball because I'm not just a movie guy. I'm also a baseball guy, which is strange because I played basketball growing up. I'm a basketball guy too, just not as much as baseball. I know it's a weird conundrum, but I don't know. Maybe it was just the fact that the Red Sox were always not winning when I was little, and everybody just had that sliver of hope. Like my parents had seen the Boston Celtics win, but they had never seen the Red Sox win. So it was 2004 when they finally won. And I remember being in the 5th grade. Everybody was going crazy. All the teachers at school were a mess because they won. They finally won. But let's talk about this because I've seen people say they prefer the 30 for 30 4 Days in October documentary, but that really just covers the baseline, the ALCS of 2004. It doesn't cover the World Series. It doesn't cover the season. You could also look at the Faith Rewarded DVD that came out from Nesson that year that covers the entire season, but there's no behind the scenes anecdotes like there are in this. And where this starts is that it starts with the building of the 2003 team, the selling of the Red Sox to the current ownership group, and their appointment of Theo Epstein to GM, and some really crazy things that you never really hear, which makes this documentary so great. It really hits you in the feels, not just with the comeback and how they came back to beat the Yankees, the team that had always been number one, that they could never get over that hump with. They could never topple. They were the evil empire, and they were supposed to be the evil empire again. But there were certain things in here where I was just like, oh, that's really eye-opening. For instance, the fact that Theo Epstein and management had talked to Grady Little in the 2003 season about not having Pedro Martinez pitch past 95 pitches. Grady Little leaves him out there in 2003 ALCS. Pedro blows the game because he's up to 115 pitches. He starts to tire. He doesn't have as much movement on his pitches. And the Red Sox lose to the Yankees that year. How close they actually were to acquiring Alex Rodriguez, I knew that they were in the running. I didn't know that they were literally at like the goal line. There's things like that in here. Or for instance, how ownership actually felt about Grady Little, which when they interview Grady Little, I really like the interviews with him because it really makes you seem like he's not really cut out for this job. He seems really clueless when it comes to this. It just seems like a big Southern guy that doesn't really know what he's doing. But somehow he had the right players. He had the right mindsets. They had the right camaraderie to get as far as they did to be one of the best teams in 2003 and just couldn't get over that hump. And they needed a new voice, which brought in Terry Francona. And it was interesting too because when that all happens and they're struggling in 2004, you get the idea that he's nearly going to be fired, which is crazy to me because Terry Francona should have been manager for life for this team. But what I really like about this is how it tells the story of how that 2004 team was built. And you can't do that without recapping and telling the story of the 2003 team, of how the current ownership bought the team and how they appointed Theo Epstein to GM, how they had a meeting with Billy Beane to be GM, and that was a done deal, but walked away at the last second, and how they used data and analytics to acquire certain players, and maybe how that's taken too much precedence nowadays. It seems like baseball now is just home runs or strikeouts, and people are getting signed because of their WAR, which I don't even know what that stat is, and I'm a massive baseball fan. Or they're getting signed because of their launch angle or their exit velocity, like stats that don't matter. But when they were using analytical data back then, it was stats that mattered. This series shows you that they were signing players based on how much they got on base, how much they walked, how much they could put the ball in play, what their on base percentage was, what was their slugging percentage. It captures that so well that I don't think any baseball documentary made today could. It's a different era of baseball now compared to the era of baseball in the early 2000s. Like once you hit maybe 2011, 2012, baseball changed. It really just became about pitchers throwing as hard as they could and batters hitting as many home runs as they could rather than driving in RBIs and hitting for average, or pitchers having all the movements that they could on their pitches to try and fool hitters. A legend like Greg Maddux could never throw that hard. The reason he was so good is because he could move the ball in and out of the zone and get hitters to look awful chasing at a pitch out of the zone because the movement was so good. And that's why you get people like Curt Schilling. And I do wish that they didn't have Curt Schilling in here, but he was an integral part to that team. So you kind of have to. At the end of the first episode, though, that's where it really got me. I teared up because they were talking about Tim Wakefield. Essentially, Tim Wakefield was going to be the ALCS MVP if the Red Sox had advanced to the World Series. He gives up the game-winning home run to Aaron Boone in the 11th inning of Game 7, takes the loss, and because Wakefield passed away after last season, it hits you even more when you see him crying at his locker, where he feels like he's going to be revered as one of the biggest villains in all of Boston sports history, where he thinks that he'll be remembered for that and nothing else and no other accomplishments. It'll just be that, similar to the play Bill Buckner made in '86. That's where this series really hits you, and it takes an even more emotional toll on you, knowing that the players are talking about Wakefield and he had just passed last season. That brought tears to my eyes. I was literally choking up. I don't think I could hold it together at all. And I don't know. I've said this before. I've noticed I'm becoming more of a big weenie, but that's where Wakefield was a beloved player all across his entire tenure. I'm even choking up just thinking about it right now. That hit me. And I thought that they honored him beautifully. I thought that they talked about him beautifully, like Doug Mirabelli talked about him beautifully. You could see how intense that the games were getting. You could see the intense rivalry. They touch upon how intense the rivalry was between the Red Sox and the Yankees back then. Fights in 2003, fights in 2004. Back when baseball was fun. Don't you just miss those days when baseball was fun? When teams legitimately hated each other for legitimate reasons? Now it's like you throw inside and people are like, ow, my arm. Why'd you aim for my arm? I'm going to charge the mound and fight you because you didn't hit me, but you're throwing inside and I don't like that. Baseball is just a bunch of pansies now. And as much as I love baseball, everybody's so soft. Can we get back to when you actually had legitimate reasons to hate each other? Like they showcase in this documentary, these two teams hated each other. When A-Rod got traded to the Yankees instead of the Red Sox, you could tell he really wanted to be a part of that rivalry. You could tell that he really wanted to be the one to spark everything. He sparked the fight. He sparked the really terrible, stupid play that he made on Bronson Arroyo, where he slapped the ball out of his glove. Yeah, that's all A-Rod. That's how dumb A-Rod was. He was in the middle of his steroid era. So what do you expect? He's stupid. But it's really the behind the scenes anecdotes, the building of to how they got to where they were, the satisfaction of them actually coming back, finally toppling the Yankees and feeling like you're on top of the world, but your job wasn't done. You still had to win the World Series, and they went out and they did that. This documentary was fantastic, and I've seen people be like, it wasn't as good as the 4 days in October thing, but see, I like the buildup. I like the background, like how teams like this were built, and you can't tell the story of the 2004 Boston Red Sox without telling the story of the 2003 Boston Red Sox, who were one of the best offensive teams in history and came oh so close to going to the World Series, and they get there the next year and they do it. That's what makes it feel so much more satisfactory in the end, because they were so close the year before. And then they do it the next year after having what feels like a mediocre season, but turning it on at the end of 2004 once they trade their prized shortstop and Nomar Garciaparra, one of their prized players. And it just seems like the team took off from there and created such an identity. And it just shows you how a loose team like this can just come together and play well and have such great chemistry, which to me is very, very important in the game of baseball. If you have somebody who feels like they're just on top of the world and better than everybody, that's not really beneficial, especially if you have a lot of young guys on your team, or if you have a lot of young guys with egos. Like I've always thought Bryce Harper had a huge ego. I think Manny Machado has a huge ego, and I don't like Manny Machado at all. It's players like that I don't like, but I've come around a little bit more on Bryce Harper in recent years because I think he's really toned it back since he went to the Phillies. When he was with the Nationals, I hated him. Same can't be said for Manny Machado. That guy tried to start shit again in the playoffs. He's a punk. I don't like him. Should be banned from baseball. That's my Manny Machado rant. Also ended Dustin Pedroia's career. Asshole. Even if you're not a Red Sox fan or a baseball fan in general, this is definitely an uplifting sports story. And if you don't know the story of the 2004 Boston Red Sox, this is definitely worth watching. I think it's better than 4 Days in October. I think it's better than the Faith Rewarded DVD that does showcase the 2004 season and goes more in depth into the season. But this, I'm more interested in the behind the scenes stuff, what was going on behind the curtain, what the executives were thinking, what ownership was thinking. And you get a lot of those anecdotes in here that were never made public before, because when things like that happen, you have your own perceptions. Like there's a lot of us at work where we're all a bunch of sports fans. We all have our own perceptions as to what's happening. Like, why is this guy on the DL? He's not really hurt. They just don't want him playing. A phantom IL, whatever it may be. We have our own theories as to what's happening. Sometimes your theory comes true. And there was stuff in here that really plays into what some fan theories could be about certain players, which makes it even more interesting. And the thing I also like about this documentary is that it's a huge stark contrast compared to the Bobby Valentine experience that came out on NBC Sports Boston like a couple years ago. If you watch this and then watch that, I like the stark contrast. One puts you in a good mood and is uplifting. The other just feels like you just went to hell and maybe never even came back. So even if you aren't a baseball fan, it's an uplifting story. Definitely check it out. I like it because I'm a baseball fan. I'm a Red Sox fan. I lived through that, and I've got to see 3 more championships after that, and hopefully more if ownership actually starts to give a shit. So we'll see. But this is my baseball content for the year. I could tell you right now the movies I would review if I had reviewed movies at the beginning of each season for baseball. I reviewed Fever Pitch, which was a Red Sox themed romantic comedy, beginning of 2021. In 2022, I probably would have done The Natural. 2023 would have been 42. This year would have been either Major League or Moneyball. And I want to get back on the ball. I want to talk about a baseball movie before each MLB season, or All-Star break, or right before the playoffs, or right after the playoffs end, because I'm a massive baseball fan. I want to talk more sports on this channel eventually, I think, or more sports movies at least. I feel like doing that, since I'm a massive baseball fan, would be a cool way to do it. Before each season, or after each season, or in the middle of each season, whatever it may be. So if you get the chance to watch this documentary, I want to know what you think of it in the comments below. Let me know. I'll leave my link to my website in the description below as well. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I'll see you at the movies somewhere.